So pinworms are caused by, well, the pinworm has a scientific name. It's Enterobius vermicularis. And it causes a condition known as pruritus ani, or having an itchy anus, is what that means. And it is called so because these worms live in your large intestine and in your rectum. And females living in your intestine will migrate to the perianal region, or the around the anus, typically at night when you're asleep, and lay their eggs. And when they do this, it causes itching. And when you itch your anus in your sleep, um, then the eggs get under your fingernails. And if you don't wash your hands first thing in the morning with this condition, then you might transfer the eggs to someone else who might eat the eggs and repeat this cycle. So just one example of something you want to avoid, having pinworms. Trichinella spiralis is another nematode that is parasitic. Most famously, it is contracted by eating undercooked pork, but there are a lot of other organisms that can harbor the trichina worm. You get trichinosis, but when you eat the larvae, the adults will mature in the small intestine, and the larvae can get into your bloodstream, get into your muscles, where they will encyst, and if an organism that is infected with trichina worm then gets eaten by another animal that can be a host, and heat hasn't killed the larvae, it can spread to other hosts, including humans. So be sure you cook your pork through to kill any potential nematodes that might be found in the muscle tissue, which is the meat that we like to eat. Ascaris lumbricoides. This is a nematode that you looked at lab. It's a fairly large nematode, but it can be parasitic. It's been estimated that 1/6 of the world's population is infected by this particular nematode. It can cause, well, if there are enough of them in your body, it can cause some serious health issues, including death. I mean, if it gets into your intestines, for example, and it occludes them or it blocks them off, then, well, that's not a good way to go. So Ascaris lumbricoides, one of the most prevalent types of parasitic nematodes out there in terms of the number of people who are host to it, especially in the developing world. Necator americanum is another parasitic nematode. It causes a condition known as hookworm. Here you can see why it's called hookworm, because its mouth has these appendages on it that enable it to latch on to its host. This is something that is typically found, especially in people who like to walk around with bare feet. They can pick up these hookworms from walking around in soil, and it can cause a painful irritation. There are a number of nematodes that cause a condition called filariasis. These are the filarial worms. One form of filariasis is caused by Dirofilaria immitis. This causes dog heartworm. The parasite, the eggs are transmitted by mosquito that can get into the bloodstream of our pets, and if left untreated, the worms will accumulate in the heart tissue and occlude it, and that can lead to death. So you want to make sure you keep your pets treated for heartworm. Wuchereria bancrofti is also a parasitic nematode. This one, also transmitted by mosquitoes, gets into your lymphatic system. And it can cause occlusions of the lymphatic system or blockages in the lymphatic system, which causes lymph to pool on a condition known as edema. And this is one of the nicer photos I found on the internet to show you of a leg that has this edema associated with elephantiasis. You can see where it gets the name. It makes the foot kind of look more elephantine compared to a normal leg. So this one called by Wuchereria bancrofti. Dracunculus medinensis is the guinea worm. Guinea worm is found in a lot of parts of the developing world. It's getting more and more rare as education is spreading. There has long been efforts to try and eradicate guinea worm because it's a fairly easy fix. Education is the way we can fix this. Guinea worm is found living inside of copepods, which are a type of crustacean that live in small bodies of water. They will consume the larvae of the guinea worm. And then, if we drink the water that has these copepods in it, which are microscopic, they can get into our muscles, and they can burrow through our muscles, and then eventually the head of the guinea worm will pop out, but the worm is stuck inside our muscles, and this can lead to some it's a very painful condition, having these worms burrowing through your muscle. In order to get rid of them, one way to do it is to very slowly and patiently wait for the worm to burrow out and sort of wind it slowly and carefully around a stick or a twig, toothpick, something like that. But if it breaks off, then it's going to be, you're going to have a dead worm in your muscle, and it's going to get infected, and there's a good chance you could end up losing that limb. So that's no good. But how does it get back into the water? Well, when you've got this really terrible, painful itch, one way to deal with to palliate that pain is to go step into some cool water and cool it off, which that's just exactly what the worm wants you to do, because then she can lay eggs in that water, which can then get ingested by the copepods, and the cycle will continue. So how can we fix this? It turns out that the copepods, which have to be consumed in order for the guinea worms to hatch, they're small, but they are big enough that you can filter them out using only a piece of cloth, like a t-shirt or just some cloth material. You pour water that you draw that you want to consume through a piece of cloth, and that is enough to strain out the copepods. So in areas where guinea worm is endemic, there are programs that try and teach people to pour their water through some type of a cloth to keep guinea worm from getting into our drinking water. But it's still out there. It's still out there. Onchocerca volvulus causes a condition known as onchocerciasis, also known as river blindness. And river blindness is called such because it was observed that people who develop this condition live near rivers. And the connection is that Onchocerca is transmitted by black flies, a type of fly that will ingest the larvae, and then when they bite a human host, they can inject some of these worms, which will then migrate to the eyes, and they can render the patient blind. One of my best friends from West Africa, where I was in Peace Corps, one of my best friends there was permanently blinded by onchocerciasis. It can get actually into the eyes, and eventually it'll degrade the optic nerve. And once that happens, there's no reversing that blindness, no reparation of the nerve at this time. And like I said, they're not all bad. I just focused on a few of the species that are most familiar, not just to gross you out, but to also demonstrate the point that nematodes are fairly simple in their body plan, but they have diversified in terms of ways that they can be transmitted from one host to another. But pretty much all nematodes kind of look very similar unless you're a nematologist, and you can tell the difference there. All right, here's one of our small phyla. This is the phylum Nematomorpha. It sounds an awful lot like nematoda, but it's just because they are thread-like in appearance. That's what Nematomorpha means. These are called Gordian worms or horsehair worms. They are exceptionally long. They can be very, very long. The larvae are parasitic, but then when they get to be adults, they don't feed. Their digestive tracts don't even really function. But we can find these around here. Often they are entomoparasites. They can be found in insects. So you might find a dead insect somewhere and find one of these crawling out of the body of that dead insect. So Gordian worms, that comes from the myth of the Gordian, or the legend of the Gordian knot, which Gordia was a city that Alexander the Great conquered, and it was supposedly protected by this knot on the gate that was only the citizens of Gordia knew how to untie this knot or something like that. And Alexander the Great just went up to the Gordian knot and solved the problem just by taking out a sword and hacking the knot to bits, and hello Gordia. So Nematomorpha. These are your very, very long, skinny nematomorph worms. Next video will begin phylum Arthropoda, our largest, most diverse phylum, which includes over 80% of all described species.